My name's Franklin. I'd rather keep my last name secret for personal reasons, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I remember the day it happened. June 20th, 2003. I was driving home from work when I noticed a sign for a yard sale. That year we'd been down on money and I needed something for my 9-year-old son's birthday. So I drove to the address that was on the sign. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was the yard was absent of people, except for what I believed the owner, sitting on his porch in a rocking chair. I decided to look around. Long story short, all I found was shit. Nothing but junk. But then I looked a little closer, and that's when I saw a dusty box shoved underneath a table. I pulled it out and dug through it, finding a coverless VCR tape with the words "The Fairly Odd Parents" written on painter's tape with Sharpie. Immediately I remembered that The Fairly Odd Parents was a show my son liked. So I decided to buy it for a birthday present. I walked to the owner and asked, "Excuse me, how much is it for the tape?" He replied, "What tape is that?" As he squinted to get a closer look, suddenly his face went white. $5, he stammered. Thinking nothing of it at the time, I paid and left. It wasn't until later that night that things started to get very scary. I gave the tape to my son, and he ran to the living room to watch it. His face lit up like a lantern in the dark. About 10 minutes later, I was in my office working on my next sales pitch when I heard a faint voice behind me. "Daddy?" I jumped and turned around to see my son clenching the door handle, shivering. "What's wrong?" I said, walking to him. "The tape," he replied. "What about the tape?" I asked. It's scary," he stammered. I decided to go see for myself. I walked into the living room to find the tape across the room, like someone had thrown it. I picked the tape up and put it in the VCR. The next episode started with the normal opening with Timmy being kicked off the bus and Vicky screaming at him, except the sound was muffled, like the recording studio was underwater. I attempted to adjust the volume to the max volume, but it wasn't the problem. I thought maybe there was a problem with the tape itself, but soon the intro was over and the volume was the normal neutral sound. The scenario was Timmy was going to miss the bus and he was rushing to get ready. Timmy's voice was normal and so were the godparents' voices, except for when Timmy's parents walked into his room. That's where it got scary. First, Timmy's father came in, goofy as always, but his voice... God, I'll never forget that voice. It was deep and distorted, like one of those people on a crime shows who hide their voice. The episode continued, and I found myself getting scared as items in Timmy's room distorted, and characters' facial features grew more and more realistic as they were motion tracking the recorder's face. Then something I'll never forget happened. Timmy was at school, and he opened his textbook and to my shock, pictures of mutilated and dismembered people laying strewn through the pages. Suddenly, my stomach began to feel uneasy, and I jumped and ran to the bathroom. After vomiting several times, I sat there, arms clutching to the toilet seat. Suddenly, I remembered the number on the yard sale sign, and I hopped up and got the phone. No answer. I slammed the phone down and grabbed my son and jumped in the car. I pounded the dashboard as I drove. I was so mad. Nasty thoughts filled my head. I imagined all the things I had seen on that godforsaken tape and how I might just murder this man. As I neared his house, I saw fire engines rushing behind me, so I pulled over to let them pass. And I noticed they pulled down to the street I was going to. I followed them, and when we arrived, I saw his house in a blazing inferno. I exited my car and ran to the nearest police officer and asked him what happened. He told me that the man had taken his own life because he claimed spirits were haunting him. I arrived home and slammed my fists on the dining room table and knocked a vase over to the floor. All of a sudden, I heard a faint noise coming from the living room. Then I suddenly realized I never turned off the TV. I rushed into the room and saw my son staring right into the TV, his blank and emotional face. My eyes went from my son to the screen, which had looked like someone's stomach with the words, "Obey the beast," carved into the flesh, and a voice softly repeating the words over and over. "What are you, Danny?" I yelled at him. He looked up at me with a crooked smile and replied, "Who's Danny?"